There should be a kind of Lacanian readers' union, one that holds regular meetings and organizes to improve working conditions and demand higher wages. Of course, readers get paid in ideas, and with Lacan, there is a big payout and bonuses for those who pay attention. But the working conditions for the English-only members of the union are bad. The Gallagher translations require readers to look up all the graphics that Gallagher has either left out or drawn poorly. We can't complain because these are our only access to the middle seminars. But unfortunately, these are the very seminars where graphic illustrations are not only useful, but essential. In Session 4 of Seminar XIII, The Object of Psychoanalysis, there is nothing in the English text, but André Green's interesting presentation requires us to see and think about two important graphics, the R-Schema and L-Schema, and this video aims to reconnect Lacan's visual thinking to this presentation. I begin with a quote from Green, which sets up an interesting comparison to what my colleague Iraj Guchani has said is a relation between entropy and negative entropy. The infiltration of the death drive, as we all know, has to do with the stabilization of a circuit, the return to a low-level energy state, that is, maximum entropy. At the same time, signifiers accumulate and, by lessening the randomness of a signifying chain, aim toward higher and higher negative entropy. Green's point is apt when we consider, as he says in his introduction, that a contrast between object and subject as binary is useless in the study of psychoanalysis. We have to see how one term, in effect, generates its opposite, back to Freud's idea of the contronym. The idea is actually pretty simple, since everyone knows that the only thing worse than having too little love is, paradoxically, having too much. We could also reverse this. The or worse or either side flips the equation, so that what we thought was a linear relation, where we are looking for the perfect balance between too little and too much, is really a circular relation. We remember the previous sessions where Lacan talks about the whole in relation to the unary trait. The whole doesn't exist in projective geometry, but in Euclidean parallax we see it in a paradoxical way, where it looks like we are required to fold something in an impossible, twisty fashion. I compare this to the idea of the Hamiltonian, a term borrowed from mathematics as an analogy. It's basically the idea that you can write equations that, instead of limiting conditions to find the right answer, you can find a more interesting kind of answer by including opposites. So instead of just using facts, you include errors, rumors, beliefs, and so on. The result is that two positions emerge that maintain their opposition, but they do this in a closed circuit that aims to conserve energy. It is a kind of constant that is constantly on the move. The critical difference is to remember that everything begins with a cut, and that the cut is also something that rotates. Guchani has used the analogy of the pinwheel, which appears to be in 3 dimensions, but is actually the result of a single cut made in projective space, which looks like 4 cuts, or rather a rotating cut, in Euclidean space. In the kind of Lacanian reading Guchani and I advocate, we get an idea from one of Lacan's writings, then we think of what must be the case if we formalize his particularly vivid graphic imagination, then we look to ethnological sources to find things that might corroborate it. In the case of the pinwheel, or R-Schema, the link is obvious. It's the mythological twins Castor and Pollux. If you don't know the story, look it up on Wikipedia. The bottom line is that one twin is mortal the other immortal. The mortal one, Castor, dies, and Pollux complains to the gods of the underworld. They offer him a compromise solution, namely that one twin can live if the other dies, but they can alternate. This is exactly the principle of union without intersection that Lacan uses to define the torus as a combination of diverging or entropic forces and converging or negentropic counterforces. I'm putting in some notation that Green and Lacan use, referring to the ego ideal as the little I small a, and ideal ego, the big I small a. The spectacular confirmation we get from ethnology allows us to return to Green's main point, that the L-schema and R-schema are the same thing drawn in different ways. The R-schema emphasizes the function of the real as a Mobius band relation of the little I small a, the ego idea, or the little I big M version of the objet A, which connects to the little m big I version. Non-orientation is the essence of projective geometry. It is the twist that doesn't exist because it is everywhere along the real projective plane, but it's also the stickiness that holds the Borromeo rings together without any of the rings actually linking. The R-schema shows how the whole system of the real, symbolic, and imaginary work in analysis, where the subject tries to return to its pre-symbolic relation to desire. The imaginary resists this because its parallax obscures the role played by non-orientation. In the fundamental polygon of the torus, we can see how the S becomes the capital E-S, that is, the paradise lost of the neurotic subject. Before the mirror stage, pleasure is not localized. There is no one-figure ground idea that stabilizes the frame between the object and the subject. After the mirror stage, a new parallax is established to see objects and subjects in constant binary opposition. To see the Mobius role in the torus, you have to flip the R-schema to match up to the fundamental polygon. Amazingly, no one has done this up to now. Green ends with an interesting comment on the role played by the handkerchief in Shakespeare's play Othello. He points to the fact that it is the way that the handkerchief circulates from the magician to Othello's mother or father, then to Bianca, then to Desdemona, to create an instrumental convergence that is the tragic ending of the play. Othello in this circuit becomes the model of every jealous person, and every neurotic is jealous in just this same way, by thinking that the way back to enjoyment before the mirror stage can be accomplished by addition, as in the accumulation of wealth, power, or fame, or, as in the case of this play, by subtraction, a subtraction of liabilities, a subtraction we could say is made at any cost. The plus and minus aspect of this failed attempt to recover the satisfactions of the pre-subjective S, the S before the bar,